everybody, welcome to another episode of Everyday Strong with Dr. Michael G. Daniels. This is your host, C.B. Baker. And we got another great one for you today. Dr. Daniels, you came to me with a very good topic of if we're serving the same God, how come we have different ways of doing it with the same supervisor? So this is what we wanted to talk about today. So let's hope we give a good performance show and information for our viewers. And oh, by the way, please make sure that you like this post if you're seeing it on YouTube and on Facebook, and please make sure you share it, get the word out, and get good vibes out there amongst all this negative energy that's going on in America during these times. But
yeah, absolutely.
Welcome to the show, Dr. Daniels.
Well, thank you. You know, I think today's topic is a very important one because if you think about how churches respond, especially in the United States of America, you know, we say we are one nation under God, but you would not know that if you look at how we operate as a nation. You know, for example, you know, you had the alt-right, the right movement marching in Washington, D.C., the Nazis, you know, those individuals that say they abhor Jews, as if God is somehow pleased with them disliking Jews, but yet, you know, they say they're Christians, right? You have them, you know, wanting to disenfranchise minorities, following very few principles of the Bible, but yet we say this country is founded upon, you know, biblical principles. So the question I think, you know, that we have to ask ourselves as a nation and also as individuals is, you know, if we all serve the one God, if all the churches serve one God, then how is it that the churches have a difficult time reconciling with one another and serving together corporately to deal with the problems that we faced in this country? I mean, you know, how can we have poverty in this country, for example, if we are the richest nation in the world?
Right.
You know, how can we have so much division if we are a nation that has been blessed by God and a nation that says we are being led by God? And so if that's the case, what are the pastors of these people doing? You know, how can you as a pastor, for example, condone that kind of rhetoric that is so divisive and that kind of thing? What are we afraid of? And why can't we work together? I think that's the issue, is what is it about us, church folk, that we cannot work together collectively under the guidance of one God?
Well, in my opinion, I think it's because you can end up with too many cooks in the kitchen, and most of the people don't want to take a back seat to one person that's going to lead a certain, even if it was a committee of people, you know, you still have to decide who is going to be your representative in the committee of the people. And it's just hard to get wrapped up in that web. But then at the end of the day, it's like, why not just do it? Like, it's you know how the saying goes. You know, if somebody spilled milk on the floor, do you walk over it or do you grab a paper towel and clean it up? Even if you're the CEO, why would you wait for the janitor to come clean it up if you had the ability to just knock it out right then?
Right.
Some of it, I think, is that. Like, I can be honest with you. Like, I've had conversations where it's like, well, who's going to be the next great black leader? And I'll say, well, it ain't going to be me because Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, and Malcolm X dead.
Right.
You know, they died young. You know, whoever's going through that wall is the one that's going to get all the punishment. So, okay, so you start looking around. Is it going to be Dr. Daniels? Dr. Daniels, well, hold up now. You know, my plate is full. Then you go to the next person. So we're continually going to the next person versus saying, what little bit can I do to help move the needle, so to speak?
But what about, how can we say, for example, that we all serve the same God, okay? We all have the same position description.
Right.
We all have the same playbook,
Yeah.
right? All of that's the same. So the question is, if that is the same, why is it that pastors don't work together more to solve problems? I'm not saying we have the answer here. I'm saying I think that's the great question. And again, maybe part of it is ego. Maybe it's our ego. Maybe it's that because we have such big egos that everyone wants to be in charge.
Then also too, each church has its own issues internally that it's got to deal with. Where if you have a church that's a mega church and everything is fine, that's got to partner with another church that's smaller and the doorknob is falling off, but because they got 5 members. Does that pastor come to the table with the mega church pastor thinking he's on the same level?
He should.
He should. But is the mega church pastor going to treat him the same?
But he should.
I get it. But we already know that he's not going to.
I know, and that's what I'm saying. Ego, right?
Right.
Because here's the thing. How many members did Peter have? How many members did John have? How many members did Andrew have? But yet all the apostles were not looked upon as if one should be greater than the other. In fact, when they asked the question and they asked Christ, because someone wanted to be great, he said, okay, if you really want to be great, then be the least, not try to be the big shot.
Right.
I mean, because in what you just said, for example, let's say the small church does need a doorknob. Well, shouldn't the large church just buy them a doorknob and move on? So, for example, think about all the churches that hand out book bags in our community, right? And think of then all the duplication of effort that we do. Wouldn't it make more sense even if all the churches didn't come under one umbrella, if within that one community, the 5 or 6 churches would say, listen, okay, rather than us, you having something on this corner, me having something on this corner, what if those 5 churches would come together and pool their resources, right? You could get quantity discounts in buying stuff, so either the smaller church would benefit because they're getting the same quantity discount as the larger church getting, and so, and the larger church would benefit because now you have more people to help, with the programmatic kind of stuff, and everyone would benefit. But that's not what happens, in the way we function. A wise man said to me one time, there are enough sinners in the community to fill up every church to capacity, and there are. So why do we keep competing for sinners as if there are not enough sinners to go around to get saved? And that's dynamics, is that for reasons that defy logic to me, most pastors are uneasy working with pastors on events that they feel don't benefit their local church directly.
Right. So I get where the problem could be at. Because you have a problem where if you're a nice sized church and you were trying to pull off an event like that and bring everybody in, the smaller churches be like, well, like if I own a church, I say, Pastor Daniels, we can let him foot most of the bill if we just kind of show up or we just put forth a little bit. But I get what you're saying, and it's difficult for people to do that. But I'm gonna ask you this question: does the meeting ever happen? Like, does a pastor of another church knock on your door and say, "Hey, I want to put on this event together"? Does those meetings ever happen?
It's rare that the pastor will call me and ask me to join with them in an event. Now, a pastor will call me and tell me they are having an event.
Right.
And ask me, will I advertise it? Oh, will I come and support their event?
Right.
But it's rare that they'll say, let's do it together. It's very, I think I've been serving as the pastor of Enoch since 1989. And I can tell you, I can count on one hand the number of times that I have been asked to partner with a group of churches other than, the Western Bayside United group to do an event. And even with the Western Bayside United group, that partnership that we have is not always one where all the churches come out, full force. Sometimes you get all of them that's a member to come out, and sometimes you don't. Sometimes the pastor will show up for the meetings, and sometimes, the pastors, they will send a substitute. And I realize everyone is busy and everybody can't be everywhere and do the same thing. But it just would seem to me that we would be more effective and more efficient if in every community we set ourselves up, and it's not, it doesn't have to be in hierarchy, it doesn't have to be a bishop over the group, but we set ourselves up so in that community we're operating, to benefit the community, right, as opposed to operating to benefit our local church. And I think that's one of the huge problems, is that oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes, the primary focus of church leaders is to run programs that benefit the local church body, as opposed to running programs to benefit the community.
Right.
And so if the program benefits community but not the local body, churches are hesitant, to make that happen. And so I think that too is a part of our problem in that regard. It used to be that churches weren't trying to be mega churches. That's a new phenomenon. It used to be churches were happy to be small community-driven churches.
Right.
That was their aim, was to be in the community, serving the community, where your membership primarily could walk to the church and came from the community. That's not the end game now. The end game now seems to be, I want to draw from all over the place. I want to be a mega church, or I want to be head over several churches stretched out, all over, the area. And there's nothing bad about that. But what I'm saying is that it seems that when we do that, we take our focus off of the community where we are, and so we don't tend to work in concert with one another anymore. It just doesn't make sense to me that if you have a Methodist church, an Episcopal church, and a Lutheran church, and they're within 3 blocks of one another, that they don't work together.
Right.
It just doesn't make any sense, because in theory they all have the same supervisor.
Right.
Jesus is our supervisor. Well, let me say it differently. Jesus is the CEO of that organization.
Right.
Because Jesus is the head of the church. So Jesus is the CEO. Now, the Holy Ghost is the manager that's been put in place for the day-to-day operations.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So if all of us are being led by that manager, then all of us should be lock, stock, walking hand in hand, working together to make that community better. But it's almost like we have forgotten our position description and what it says.
Right.
And we certainly don't go by the handbook that tells us to work together anymore.
No, we don't. And the ironic thing, like you said, is everybody's supposed to be following the same playbook and handbook and everything, but they're not. Is what caused the different denominations to even to exist part of the issue of why they're not able to work together?
Well, different denominations, the original break, if we go back and look at it from a historical perspective, and of course we don't have enough time to go through the entire division, but originally everyone would be what we would call Catholic. If you were a Christian, pretty much that's what you were, basically. If you were to, again, most historians would say that the way the current structure is of churches, that Catholicism was it. But there were some difficulties within the Catholic Church in how they interpreted church doctrine, some basic doctrinal issues that they had. And Martin Luther was one of the primary ones that had some problem with some of the doctrine. Not that he wanted to split the church up. He wanted the church to operate more like the Bible indicated. Like for example, during his time, they sold dispensations. If someone for example, if someone in your family died, right? And they would go to purgatory and they would be there for a while, and you could go to the priest presumably and give him a nice donation. He could pray that person out of purgatory and get them back into heaven, those kind of things.
Right.
One of the jokes was that there were enough pieces of the cross sold to have built Noah's Ark. That all that kind of stuff was going on. And Martin Luther thought that was wrong. And so he had his thesis and he pinned it, on the door of the church, and that caused people to start thinking differently. And so there was a division at that point in time, and so that division started there, and it kept on dividing, because then one group would leave the church. When they left the Catholic Church, they protested, right? They were protesting some of the things that Catholicism stood for. And so that's why if you're not Catholic, you're called a Protestant. If you're a Christian, you're a Protestant because you protested that part of it. But even within the Protestants, some of them had different ideas.
Right.
And so then they would break away and say, well, you know what? Because some of them still believe that Catholicism basic ideals were okay, but just a few things that they, so you keep breaking away, and you break away, so you keep getting further and further away from those basic things of Catholicism. So so that breakaway was based on doctrinal differences, and so that was that division. Even when we don't have doctrinal differences in current, like for example, all Baptist churches don't operate. All Baptist churches can be let me say it differently. You can have 3 Baptist churches in the same neighborhood. They can be right beside each other.
Right.
But that don't mean they're going to operate as if they were one. It doesn't mean that they're going to come together and say, hey, listen, let's fight hunger in this neighborhood together.
Right.
Let's fight homelessness in this neighborhood together. Let's fight unemployment together in this neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And they'll be Baptists.
Right.
And it could be in the same conference and won't do it.
Right. There's one guy, when he mentioned to me years ago, he said, I don't understand why in Franklin, the city of Franklin, why there's so many churches on South Street. And I was like, one day I was riding down South Street, and I said, he ain't lying. It's like the church was like 4 churches on South Street. Mm-hmm. And in a city of 10,000 people, why do you have 4 churches on one street? Mm-hmm. It didn't make any sense.
Right.
It's like, so we can't all get together and say, okay, one person can be the pastor or the leader, and we all go to church, and then we say, okay, what we're doing for the community this month. Mm-hmm. Like, we all can't just get together and just agree to that. Mm-hmm. It's actually ridiculous when you really sit and think about it.
I agree. It is. It is not biblically based the way we operate as a unit. And I guess maybe if you go back and consider the difficulties that the apostles had, here you have 12 men, right? And I'm when I say 12, I am recognizing that Judas committed suicide, and Paul now becomes the 12th apostle. Okay, you have 12 apostles that have been commissioned by Christ to go out and evangelize the world, and they can't work together. Right. They upset with each other, and Paul is upset with Peter, and they get the arguments are so heated that you take this one and you go one way, right, and I go this way, and as if they're dividing up the continent and say, listen, that's your side of town, this is my side of town, right, and I'm gonna go here and preach Jesus, and you go there and preach Jesus, but I don't want to see you no more. Because we can't get along. And so even back then, there were those issues of personalities that were causing problems. But I will say this about them, is that at least the fight they fought was not one of ego per se. It was one of a difficulty in letting go of their past beliefs, you know. So there were doctrinal issues that they dealt with. We have personality problems, it seems like, that keep us from working together and keep us from making an impact in this world when we ought to be. Again, it's rare that you will come across an African American that will say, I'm an atheist.
Mm-hmm.
Very rare. You know, think about how many folk that you come across to say, I'm a Christian. Now, if all of us are Christians, why is any African American starving?
Right.
Or any black? Some people don't like the term African American, so
Right.
Black American, because I don't want to offend anybody, right? Why is any Black American starving if all of us are Christians?
Right.
That to me makes zero sense. You know, why? How can you have a church, a mega church that has 4,000 and 5,000 members, and like you said, have another small church with 50 members, where the air conditioning is not working,
Right.
and they only need $400 to get it fixed?
Right.
You know, what is $400 to the
Right.
budget
Right.
of a mega church? You know, I mean, why can't we just look back and say, okay, I'll help you? I mean, I know you can.
But why doesn't it? Why for? Let's assume that the megachurch knows,
Mhm.
right? But why isn't that happening?
That's a $100,000 question that I don't understand.
Because they can afford it,
Of course they can.
you know, and it's a nonprofit organization, so the tax. Like I can't think of any reason why they wouldn't do it.
Of course they can, and there's no reason. Now I get it. You know, you have your budgets and you have your money set aside. You know, because you have your missions over here. You know, you probably have your own benevolent fund, and you got payroll. You have all these things going on. But again, my thing is, it's almost like we're saying, if it doesn't benefit my church, then there's no need for me to be a part of it. But if, you know, here's how I look at it. If everybody in my community gets saved, I benefit because I don't have to lock my doors.
Right.
You know, I can feel comfortable because you ain't gonna be breaking in my house, stealing stuff from me. So I mean, I'm not the pastor of a mega church, but if I was the pastor of a mega church, I'll be more than happy to help a smaller church out, because you know what? I can't do everything.
Right.
And so maybe they can do some stuff that I can't do, you know,
Right.
and that's true. Everybody doesn't feel comfortable in the mega church. Somebody will feel more comfortable in the smaller church.
Right.
So to me, that ought to be a part of your mission strategy, to say, let me help this church out. You know, you can't help everybody out, but you can say, let me help this one and this one and this one, so that they remain viable, so
Right.
that they can still have this positive impact in the community and reach some lives that I can't reach. Now, true, maybe as a mega church, you could be more efficient if you were directing it yourself. But if you help the other church become efficient, then they can reach out and they can, you know, pull some folk in, because there are enough centers to fill up all the churches,
Right.
the mega church and the smaller church.
Right. So so it goes back to this, basically the ego, and it's really nothing in it for the church. Because I honestly can't see you sitting in a meeting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you say, Good Neighbors air conditioning is out and they're in dire need of $500. I can't see anybody at Enoch Baptist Church meeting raising their hand against giving them $500.
Let me tell you, if I'm in a church meeting and our church, the church that's beside us was Good Samaritan.
Good Samaritan.
Good
right.
Samaritan. If they tell me, look, Good Samaritan air conditioning out and they need $5,000 to fix it, I'm gonna say to Enoch, give them the $5,000, not loan it to them.
Right.
Give them the $5,000 so they can fix it. Now, does that mean that we have a lot of money? No, we don't. But the question that would come to my mind is that if I believe God, and if that $5,000 will not put me in a bankrupt position, why wouldn't I help that church out? Because I believe that God's going to bless me for doing that. Because I'm helping one of the partners that he has commissioned to go out and save some souls.
Right.
And so why wouldn't I help them? And I would, most definitely, I would help them. And so you're right. To me, it just makes good sense from an efficiency, effective standpoint, but also just from a biblical standpoint. Am I my brother's keeper? I would say yes, I'm supposed to be my brother's keeper. And is it more efficient for me to partner with that church? Of course it is.
Right.
It's always more efficient when we can use the power of synergy.
Right.
When we can not, when 1 + 1 is no longer 2, but 1 + 1 now becomes 3, because of how we're operating. It just makes more sense to me. But I hate to say it's ego, but I gotta agree with you. I think maybe when you boil it down, it is that egos prevent churches from fear and egos.
Right.
Because there's some smaller churches that may fear that if I do work closely with this larger church, they're going to end up pulling my members into that church.
Right.
But my theory has always been simple. They don't belong to me.
Right.
There's not one member at Enoch that belongs to me. Them folk belong to Jesus. Peter.
But if now on the flip side of the coin, if a smaller church and the members say they could not afford the church that they're in, it's falling apart, and it was to be absorbed, let's say, into Enoch, but the pastor's like, well, I'm bringing these people here. Do you have something for me to do? I don't have to be the senior pastor. I don't have to be preaching every Sunday. Is there something that I could be doing?
Absolutely.
I already know the answer is yes.
Absolutely.
So it's like going back to the ego. Are we so caught up in I want to be the leader of this named church versus doing the actual work?
I would have to say yes. I think that's a huge part of it. It is that ego says, I want to be in charge. I want to be the pastor. I want to be a pastor. I can tell you this, me personally, and this is something I've always said to myself. Let's say a younger pastor opens up a church 2 blocks away from Enoch, and the Enoch members start joining that church, in droves, so that all of the members are over there now. I'm not going to be mad. If that pastor is more effective at helping people maximize their lives in Christ, I'm going to be happy, not mad.
Right.
Because the goal is not for me to be a pastor. The goal is for Christ to get glory. See, that's the goal. The goal is for Christ's people, for the people who have been placed on this earth to recognize who their creator is and to recognize who Jesus is. And if they are doing that, that's what's important. And if that means I'm not a pastor, I'm just as happy as I can be, because that's what the end game ought to be. The end game should never be for me to be the pastor of a mega church. The end game should be for me to expose as many people as possible to what the Bible teaches. And if they get it, I don't care how they get it. If they get it through me, if they get it through a donkey, I'm just as happy as I can be, because that's what it ought to be. Now, I'm not saying everyone has that viewpoint, but that's my viewpoint. I'm not afraid of not being a pastor.
Right.
What I'm afraid of is not being what God wants me to be. And that is a servant that gets people to Christ.
So, you heard it here. Right. This is your host, C.B. Baker. Next time.